What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the 5th episode in Season 2 of HBO's hit TV show, House of the Dragon. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to watching the episode yet, and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. So this episode starts at Driftmark, and we see that Corlys has indeed received the news of Rhaenys' death. And we watch him slowly climb the steps to the Driftmark throne and sit, filled with melancholy, as he is no doubt measuring all that he has lost to this point. We then see Rhaenyra standing on a balcony at Dragonstone, looking out over Blackwater Bay, also mourning the loss of the one experienced female voice on her council. From there, we go to King's Landing, where we see rotten fruit at the marketplace and little food to go round in general. And we finally see Sir Criston leading a procession through the streets of King's Landing in front of a cart carrying the head of Meleys, while a herald declares that the dragon was slain by King Aegon. Now, as the people stand by watching, they appear to have mixed feelings about what they're seeing, that being the head of a dragon being presented in this way, which seems to surprise Sir Criston. He then asks Sir Gawain, don't they realize we won the battle? And Sir Gawain responds, strange victory, if it even was one. And behind the cart carrying the head of Rhaenys' dragon, we see a wooden box, and that's the box that is carrying the king's body. Now, in the crowd, we see Hugh Hammer walking next to a young man who, upon seeing the sight, remarks that he thought that the dragons were gods. And Hugh tells him that it's just meat. And as the procession passes by the Red Keep, we see Alicent and Aemon standing on the balcony looking down. Now, Alicent eventually looks over at her second son, who stands there in regal fashion, and she notices that Aemon is in possession of the cat's paw dagger, which seems to concern her. But I think it's Aemon's overall demeanor that is concerning to her, as well as her knowing kind of what he's capable of. Now, as Aegon's body is brought into the castle, Alicent leaves. Now, Aemon stays behind, seeming to be deep in thought. Now, inside the palace, we see the guards carrying Aegon's body, still in the wooden box, past Helena, and finally into his chambers. They remove his effects and eventually take Aegon himself out of the box, laying him upon his bed, as Alicent approaches cautiously. Now, as the maesters begin their work, Alicent asks Grand Maester Orwell if Aegon is alive. He responds, "His grace remains with us for the moment." She continues to watch as the maesters begin to remove his armor, being careful not to tear his burned skin in the process. They reset his broken bones, all as Aegon lay there helpless and unconscious. Alicent interjects again, asking if Aegon will die. And Grand Maester Orwell responds, "Honestly, I cannot say. Now, if you'll excuse me, Your Grace, these next hours are most critical." Alicent, understanding what there is that's happening, she backs away to make room for the maesters to do their work. Now, Aemon enters the room and stands at the foot of Aegon's bed, telling his mother that someone will have to rule in Aegon's stead. So you see, he's not really worried about Aegon being hurt. He's worried about who's going to sit in the chair, because Aegon can't do it right now. And, look, this group of scenes was an interesting way to start the episode. There were mostly visuals used here, and not a lot was said by the characters as we, the audience, get a chance to examine the immediate aftermath, or the most immediate aftermath that you can conjure up, of the battle at Rook's Rest. And it kind of reminds me of the season 6 finale of Game of Thrones, The Winds of Winter, wherein Cersei blew up the Sept of Baelor to avoid having to stand trial in front of the 7 judges, her and Loras Tyrell, excuse me, yeah. And that episode also started with a collection of scenes with not much dialogue to kind of set the mood. And here we see that both Corlys and Rhaenyra mourn the loss of Rhaenys, probably for different reasons, as Rhaenyra and Rhaenys were never particularly close. Corlys, having now had the last piece of his immediate family taken from him, as he's already lost his daughter and his son, even though we know that Ser Laenor is alive somewhere, but Corlys doesn't know that. And now he sits in the Hall of Nine, and you can tell he feels the emptiness. And it's all because of his insatiable thirst for power. As for Rhaenyra, she has lost a strong female voice on her council, as well as a dragon, and will now have to figure out how to manage the men on the Black Council without essentially her greatest ally in her corner. Now, next we find Sir Criston in his chambers cleaning the blood off of his sword. Now, Alicent enters and asks him what happened. Cole tells her that they took the castle at the cost of some 900 men. Alicent responds, "So I've heard." He tells Alicent that he left a meager garrison behind to protect the castle, along with Sunfire, who was long in the dying. Now remember that, as I'm sure that's going to be important somehow moving forward. Now Alicent then specifically asks what befell the king. So Criston tells her that his grace fought valiantly. She then asks what part Aemon had in what happened. And Sir Criston replies simply, "I could not say." Now, I don't really like to mention books in these videos because I always tell people that the writers and the showrunners of these shows do not have to follow the books. In fact, Game of Thrones made a lot of departures from the books from what I understand. But I'll mention the book here because it would appear that House of the Dragon is going to depart quite a bit from what happened in the book Fire and Blood because, from what I understand of this story, Rhaenyra actually meets her end on Dragonstone when Aegon feeds her to Sunfire. So I'll be honest with you, that's where I was expecting this story to go. But Sir Criston just told Alicent that Sunfire is dying. So my question becomes, does that mean the writers and the showrunners have decided that that is not how Rhaenyra will die in the show? And this kind of has me worried because when you juxtapose that with the fact that the writers are clearly trying to make Rhaenyra the hero of this tale, one has to ask him or herself, will Rhaenyra die at all during this series? Now, next, we see Rhaenyra standing before her Black Council on Dragonstone as Sir Broom carefully berates Rhaenyra for their current state of affairs. He explains that their largest dragon has been killed, that Criston Cole marches about the Crown Lands unchallenged, that Duskendale and Rook's Rest are both gone, and that they still have ground army except the one they hope that Daemon will be able to raise in the Riverlands, reminding Rhaenyra that he left them after he and her had a marital spat. Now, Rhaenyra asks Sir Broom if he takes issue with her. He reminds Rhaenyra that his loyalty to her is proven. Rhaenyra explains that his willingness to give her deference in a time of war is not. He tells Rhaenyra that he does not doubt her capabilities or her quickness of mind, but that as a member of the gentler sex, she has no experience in the strategy of battle or their execution. Now, Rhaenyra reminds Sir Broom that there has been peace in their lifetime and that he has seen no more battles than she has. And after a long silence, both Rhaenyra and Sir Broom take a seat. Rhaenyra tells Maester Gerardis to send ravens to Maidenpool and Crackclaw Point, instructing them to man their garrisons with the promise of weapons should they want them, in case Sir Criston continues his campaign across the Crown Lands. Now, Sir Stettin Darkland insists that they must answer Rook's Rest and Duskendale. Lord Baltimore states that those keeps are already lost, but that Vhagar may be depleted after such a hard-fought battle. The council also mentions that if Aegon is dead, they will soon know it, but that it would be a victory in name only, as the Greens would surely prop up another in his stead. Then someone remarks that the time may be ripe to strike King's Landing, and Rhaenyra pledges that it must be her who does it. But Lord Massey reminds her that she is the crown, and that such an act would be completely out of the question. And Rhaenyra in frustration, then asks what the council would have her do. Now, here we can see Rhaenyra's growing frustration with her council because she wants to be a more active participant in the conflict at hand, but like the Green Council tried to tell Aegon, her job is not to fight. It's to stay safe and let others fight on her behalf. And unfortunately, that's the gig. We would never send our president to the Middle East in camouflage tactical gear and put a gun in his hand and say, come on and eat with us. Let's go hunting. Even historically speaking, most military generals did not fight. They sat in the back of the battles on horseback and they sent others to fight. Why? Because if they die, you get chaos, plain and simple. And I don't know why Rhaenyra is acting like she doesn't already know this. Even Rhaenys wouldn't let her go to Rook's Rest herself because that's just not the monarch's job. So next we find Baela sitting in the library at the desk writing something. Now Jacaerys enters to her surprise, and she asks him where he's going. He tells her that he is going to Harrenhal to treat with Daemon and have him reaffirm his loyalty and report his standing. Now Baela asks Jacaerys if he thinks he can tame Daemon when Rhaenyra herself could not. And he remarks that Rhaenyra gladly sends Baela away to scout and fight while he sits there forced to play the coddling princeling, and that is humiliating. Now Baela reminds Jacaerys that he is the succession. Jacaerys remarks that he must be seen to act for both his mother's claim and his. And, Baela nods silently in agreement, and Jacaerys tells Baela that he can sit still no longer, that he must act. He thinks for a moment and then decides that he will go to the frays of the crossing and treat with them in order to secure the northern armies passing into the Riverlands. Baela tells Jacaerys that his mother won't like it, and Jacaerys tells her not to say anything until he's gone, before leaving. So you see, the same way Rhaenyra complains about not being allowed to fight by the lords on her council, she denies Jacaerys the opportunity to participate in the conflict for the exact same reason. So she knows exactly why people don't want her going to war herself, because she is depriving her son in the exact same way. Anyway, next we find Daemon in the Riverlands on the back of Caraxes threatening members of House Bracken, telling them that if they don't renounce the false King Aegon and bend the knee to him, not Rhaenyra, mind you, that their house will burn. Now, Lord Amos Bracken tells Daemon that he would sooner be the Lord of Bones and Cinder before he would bend the knee to some heathen Blackwood cunt and his hired dragon, Then he turns his back and slowly rides away on his horse. And I gotta say, it was maybe the most gangster move I've seen in this entire series to this point. My man just had no concern for the heat that might be on his neck. He was just like, hey, we choose fire. And then next, we see Daemon sitting on a rock with Willem Blackwood standing nearby as he explains that he did not think the Brackens would be so eager to die. Now, Sir Willem tells him that they made their choice and that he should have indulged them. And Daemon tells Sir Willem that he needs the Brackens alive, that he came to the Riverlands to raise swords and not corpses, and that despite Sir Willem's objections, the Brackens are exactly the kind of men that he needs. He then tells Sir Willem that it may yet be possible for both of them to achieve their needs. He goes on to ask Sir Willem to try less fighting and more persuading. Sir Willem admits that the Brackens are unyielding in battle, but that every man has his weaknesses. Daemon then smiles, noting that Sir Willem understands exactly what he means for him to do. And he goes on to state that there are things that the crown must not be seen to do before finally telling Sir Willem to show them his worst. And, it sounded to me in this scene like Daemon was asking Sir Willem to maybe kidnap some women and some children, steal some livestock, burn some fields, the kind of stuff that's considered dirty pool in war, all in an effort to force the Brackens into submission, which is absolutely, like I said, it's dirty pool if you ask me. But since we don't exactly hear what Daemon wants the Blackwoods to do here, we'll have to wait till later in the episode exactly to see what these actions are and what results they yield. Now, from there, we go to the Eyrie, and we finally get to see Jane Eyre as she speaks to Rhaena, who has arrived with, I assume, the children and the baby dragons in tow. And Jane explains to Rhaena that over the centuries, many armies have failed to traverse the Bloody Gate. And we already know that because the same thing is said in the Game of Thrones series. And she goes on to say that the Eyrie itself is impregnable. And we've heard that line before as well in Game of Thrones. She then goes on to say, unless it is attacked from the sky. Rhaena reminds Lady Jane that she promised Rhaenyra 15,000 swords. Lady Jane reminds Rhaena that that promise was made in exchange for the protection of a dragon. And then Rhaena smartly tells Lady Jane that Rhaenyra has exceeded her expectations by sending not one dragon, but two. Lady Jane remarks that both dragons are still wet from the egg and that she has hunting hounds that are more fearsome. Rhaena remarks that the dragons are dragons nonetheless, and that she did not specify the size of the beasts in her request. Lady Jane then asked Rhaena if she would goad her while her bread and shelter now depend on her pleasure. That's what I was thinking too. I'm like, girl, you gonna talk to me like that in my house? Rhaena explains that the dragons will grow in time, and Lady Jane explains that she does not have time. She thinks for a moment before remarking that she must like feeling powerless. Rhaena replies, so do I. Lady Jane then tells Rhaena that she will expect her at supper later and offers condolences for Rhaenys' passing before leaving the room. And, this scene was, interesting enough. It's just, used to kind of push the episode forward. But it did show us exactly how Rhaena was able to win the Lady Jane Eyre to Rhaenyra's cause. And it all came down to the fact that the pair found commonality in feeling powerless. Because Rhaena initially tried to, handle Jane, but she was like, oh no, ma'am, not while you eat my food and sleep in my guest room. So, she had to pivot kind of quick and take some of the bass out of her voice, and, all that good stuff. But anyway, I guess it was a quick character development moment for Rhaena, which I'm not sure we'll even get to see much more of this season. Now, next, we see Rhaenyra back on Dragonstone having girl time with Mysaria. And she tells her how the men on her council was like talking to her crazy at the last meeting. Girl, you won't believe what they said, right? Mysaria asks if the men hold her responsible for the loss of Rhaenys and her dragon. Rhaenyra remarks that she wishes that they had. She goes on to say that the men on her council talk around her. She claims that they would make her queen, but that they wish to keep her confined to Dragonstone. And Mysaria tells her that the men on her council betray their own smallness. Rhaenyra remarks that she can't blame them, that she's the sovereign, that she cannot simply do as she pleases, and that the war has forever been for men to make. Mysaria reminds Rhaenyra that she is her father's chosen successor. Rhaenyra explains to Mysaria that her father did not prepare her to fight, and that the lords on her council know it, as does Daemon. Now, at this point, Alinda Massey enters, daughter of Lord Gorman Massey and Rhaenyra's lady-in-waiting, asking if she wants her meal brought to her in the library, and she basically, goes off on the poor girl, right? Not now, Mysaria then asks Rhaenyra if she will send for Daemon. Rhaenyra remarks that for too long she has looked to Daemon for strength. She goes on to claim that she doesn't know her part in all of this because the path she walks now has never been walked before. Mysaria tells Rhaenyra that Sir Criston has made a mistake, that parading the head of a dragon through the streets of King's Landing like a prize of war, that people will see that as an ill omen, that they are afraid that the king has fallen, that bread is scarce, and that they whispered that when Viserys lived, there was peace. And, Rhaenyra asks if whispers will tear down stone and break shields. Mysaria warns Rhaenyra not to underestimate the people, that they are 1,000 living in the shadow of the Red Keep, forgotten for far too long. Rhaenyra asks Mysaria if she thinks the people will turn to her. Mysaria explains that to the discontented, rumors are feed. Rhaenyra takes a moment to think before Mysaria tells her that what she cannot do, she should let others do for her, that there is more than one way to fight a war. And, next we see Alinda Massey headed off to King's Landing as Rhaenyra stands on the balcony looking on. Now, next we see Rhaenyra and Baelor speaking about Rhaenys, with Baelor claiming that the thought of Rhaenys laying broken in a field amongst their enemies really bothers her. Rhaenyra then tells her the story of how Rhaenys claimed Meleys. Baelor tells Rhaenyra that Daemon was furious because that was the dragon that his mother rode, and that he had tried to claim her but was denied. Rhaenyra tells Baelor that Rhaenys was fierce in love and in anger. She goes on to tell Baelor that Rhaenys did not always care for her, but that she is grateful for what she gave her in the end. Baelor laments not knowing Rhaenys when she was young. Now, Rhaenyra tells Baela that she is very much like Rhaenys in some ways. She then gives Baela a metal box and asks that she gives it to Corlys, telling her that she does not wish to stand alone. Now, next we see Daemon in Harrenhal being intimate with a woman who it turns out to be his mother as she whispers sweet nothings in his ear. She tells him that he was always the strong one, that he was the finest swordsman, the fearless dragon rider. She tells him that his brother had great love in his heart, but that he lacked Daemon's constitution. She tells him that Viserys was not suited for the crown, but that he was made to wear it, if only he had been born first. And then the dream sequence ends with her professing that Daemon is her favorite son. And look, I know the Targaryens, by nature are a bit incestuous, but I can't lie. This was creepy as hell. And we see that, Harrenhal is still making Daemon its bitch, if you know what I mean. Anyway, Daemon comes out of the dream seated at the table in the hall, and Sir Simon asks Daemon whether or not the duck is to his liking, if he would prefer goose instead. And as he passes the plate around the table, we see Alicent attending to the needs of the men at the table. And Sir Simon tells Daemon that, given the dire news from Rook's Rest, that it would appear that the winds have shifted, that each side has suffered great loss, and will be unsure of what is to come. Daemon suggests a show of strength. He tells Sir Simon that Sir Willem Blackwood is currently bringing the Brackens to heel, and that they should prepare to receive a great host. Sir Simon asks him if he is sure of this. Daemon explains that the Rivermen can be led, it's just a matter of showing them who they should follow. He then asks Sir Simon how the work on the castle progresses. Sir Simon tells him that they are drawing water for the kitchens and lighting the forges, but that is only the beginning. He goes on to state that the roof has needed tending for quite some time, and the storerooms need updating, as well as the Wailing Tower. And that the bat dung has made the corridors of the castle virtually impassable. He then mentions that he is sure there are smiths to be found nearby. Daemon tells him to send for them, as well as the farmers and huntsmen, so that they might have meat and wood. Sir Simon then carefully asks how all of these things will be paid for. He tells Daemon that Lord Larys moved all of the family's gold to King's Landing after the death of his father and brother. Daemon asks if there's any gold in the coffers, and Sir Simon tells him that there's just enough to keep their small establishment fed and warm. He then asks Daemon if he might write to the Queen for coin, and Daemon tells Sir Simon that he will guarantee payment himself before getting up from the table. Now, as he walks away, Sir Simon quietly bids the other men to stand. He then answers Daemon, "Very well, Your Grace." Now, Daemon stops in his tracks and turns, and he corrects him, telling him to address him as "my king." Sir Simon reminds him that he is not the king, but instead the prince. Daemon asks what he would call the husband of the queen. Sir Simon tells him that he would call the husband of the queen the king, consort. And Daemon remarks that last bit just seems unnecessary. And look, here you see Sir Simon is starting to feel comfortable standing up to Daemon a bit. And I think it's because of the battles that Sir Criston is winning in the Crown Lands. I think Sir Simon is starting to imagine a world where he may have to change his allegiance. Kind of like the Boltons did, in Game of Thrones. So, he's got a little more bass in his voice than he did when Daemon first arrived. And also, has anybody noticed that nobody talks to Alicent except Daemon? I'm starting to wonder if in the show she might just be a ghost of some kind and only Daemon can see her. She hasn't said a word to anyone else since she was introduced. And at this point, we've had a couple of episodes. I'm sure that's not by accident. So, I'm kind of interested in seeing and learning more about Alicent in the show and how the writers plan to use her in the show as we power through the last 3 episodes of this season. Anyway, we find Alicent in a small council meeting wherein Grand Maester Orwell is telling everyone that Aegon suffered grievous burns all over his body, that he has several broken bones, and that there are likely other injuries that cannot be seen. Alicent thanks Grand Maester Orwell for his works and asks if Aegon has woken. Grand Maester Orwell says no, and he tells Alicent in all honesty that he is not sure Aegon will ever wake, that their king's fate now lies with the gods. So, Alicent stands and, puts her palms on the table and proclaims that the king cannot rule in his sleep and that the council must now appoint a regent to take Aegon's place until he wakes or doesn't. Lord Larys agrees and asks Alicent if she has someone in mind. And, she, of course, nominates herself, citing that she ruled in Viserys' stead when he was unwell. Lord Weil remarks that that was a time of peace and that this is not. He goes on to note that Aegon has an heir and that Aemon should rule King's Landing in his stead. Now, Grand Maester Orwell kind of, tries to clap back, claiming that Alicent has shouldered the duties of ruling before and did so admirably, and so he votes for her. Now, Lord Tywin Lannister suggests Aemon, as does Lord Larys, citing that their faction's claim to the throne lies in part with those who do not wish to see a woman rule, so raising up a woman of their own would not be beneficial, politically speaking. And finally, when Sir Criston is asked, without looking up at Alicent or anyone for that matter, he says simply, Aemon is the next in line. It must be him. Aegon then replies, it's agreed then, and he swiftly gets up and walks over to the king's seat, placing his ball in its cradle and sitting down before asking what their standing is in the Riverlands. He is told by Lord Tywin that they are currently in disarray, that Daemon has little hope of raising an army there at the moment. Lord Larys then remarks that they should send word to Lord Oscar Tully, as he should inherit his grandfather's mantle sooner rather than later. Aemon then scolds Lord Larys for allowing Harrenhal to be taken by Daemon. He then tells Lord Tywin that his brother's hosts can quicken their pace and meet Daemon, checking the Rivermen before they have a chance to organize themselves, all as we watch Alicent have what looks to be a full-on panic attack in her seat. Now Aemon asks, what else? Grand Maester Orwell tells Aemon that the small folk have grown weary of the Sea Snake's blockade, that many are fleeing the city, spreading word of their fear and unrest. And Aemon decides that to remedy that by closing the gates, stating that no one is to enter or leave without consent, including merchants. He then stands and tells everyone to ready their tasks and that they will meet again at first light. And then finally he tells somebody to cut down the effing rat catchers. Now, this particular scene went pretty much exactly how I thought it would, and I think in the case of the Greens, this is what had to happen. Even though I also think, based on what we saw last episode, it might be exactly what Aemon has wanted all along. Remember, he remarked that he would make a better king than Aegon back in episode 9 of last season, when he and Sir Criston were moving through the city in silence, looking for him on Alicent's behalf. And Aegon's constant teasing of him probably just made it easier for him to take the opportunity to, I'll just say, avoid protecting him during the Battle of Rook's Rest. Plus, I think Aemon might have killed him at the crash site if Sir Criston had not come along when he did. It's just kind of one of those things where I just think that Aemon's just over Aegon's shit. And so he was like, I have this chance here to maybe kill two birds with one stone. You kill Rhaenys and Meleys, and if we can get Aegon up out of here with Sunfire, then I can just sit in this chair and we can just keep it pushing. But next, we revisit Hugh Hammer and we find him tending to his sick child as Kay remarks that there is no food, that their neighbors have started stealing from each other, and that they must get out of King's Landing. Hugh asks her where he should have them go, explaining that for all they know, every road leads into Dragon's Teeth. Kay tells Hugh that Rhaenyra will not let Meleys' head being paraded through the streets of King's Landing go unchallenged. She tells Hugh that they should make for Tumbledon, that her brother will have room for them. But Hugh does not want to be made to beg for help. Kay explains that they are already beggars, asking if Hugh has been paid for the machines he was asked to build for Aegon. Hugh explains that the king has promised payment, and Kay tells him that the king has lied. She begins to cry, telling Hugh that he can stay and wait for the king's empty promises, but that those promises he can feed the mouths of ghosts. And in this scene, it just looked like the writers are getting Hugh closer to partaking in this war as the dragon rider of Vermithor. They even mention Tumbledon, which will have some significance as this story continues, or so we believe. Like I said, I don't know what the writers are going to do here as it pertains to how they're going to depart from the books. But I look forward to the writers staying close enough to the books with not only Hugh, but the other dragon seeds we've already met, those being Adam of Hull and Oath White. Now, from there, we see the rat catchers being cut down, and Sir Criston seeing it done. Now, Alicent approaches and accuses Sir Criston of being too faithful to the Prince Regent. He tells Alicent that Aegon is the next in line, and he is, that it is the order of things. Alicent tells Sir Criston that he knows what Aemon is. I don't see how that's relevant, but, okay. She then asks if his loyalty has faded or if it only flourishes at night and flees the sunrise like a moth. Sir Criston tells Alicent that they have given the war to the dragons and that a dragon rider should lead them. Now, Alicent asks what of justice and of temperance. She asks if strength is now to be their only god. And Sir Criston simply stares at her. And she asks him if he is casting her aside. Says the woman who just secretly killed his baby, but, okay. Sir Criston tells her that he has spared her, that what they must do now is terrible, asking if she herself would preside over it, which I think is a really good question. She then tells Sir Criston not to ask her to his bed or speak her name, and then she stomps off like a child. Now, this scene aggravated me, mostly because I recognize that the writers are literally trying to ruin Alicent episode by episode while they build Rhaenyra up. So, let me see if I've got this straight. Alicent believes that she should be in power. In fact, she believes it steadfastly, which makes me ask the question, why was she really banging Sir Criston? You see, I never liked the fact that she followed behind Rhaenyra with Sir Criston, essentially making the very same mistake that Rhaenyra made with him years ago. Plus, I thought it was dangerous from the standpoint that she could either get pregnant, check, or Aegon or Aemon could find out, and that could just get messy at a time when they all need to be unified or die. But I accepted this state of affairs under the guise that Alicent always had a crush on Sir Criston. Remember how she and Rhaenyra fawned over him at the tournament in the first episode. In fact, I think Alicent was a little bit butthurt that Rhaenyra banged him out after knowing that Alicent liked him, even though she was already married to Viserys by the time it happened. But now it's looking more like Alicent was banging Sir Criston in order to control him, as if her sharing herself with him would buy his unyielding loyalty for a lifetime, and especially during wartime, no matter the circumstances. And if that's indeed the case, then I think she's trifling and she's a bit immature, and she deserves exactly what she's getting right now, and maybe even a little more. But whatever the writer's true goal with Alicent Hightower, they are writing her character badly. Because just a few episodes ago, when Rhaenyra snuck into the Great Sept and pulled a knife on her, she was completely resigned to the fact that she had no power. But now, just 2 episodes later, she's mad that she doesn't have any? Make it make some sense. And this idea that she can't rule because she's a woman, when she already has ruled King's Landing once before, is the dumbest trope I can think of for this particular situation. Because the writers have already shown us that the Greens have no issue with a female ruler, because they already had one. So the writers trying to make that a thing is just stupid at this point. Even though, I understand the point being made in the moment, but this idea that at the Green Council, they're like, oh, yeah, the writers seem to try to hammer the point home that she can't rule because she's a woman. And I'm like, well, it's not that. It's that, now Aegon literally has an heir. And Aemon, if Aegon was to die, Aemon would be raised up and crowned king anyway. So why wouldn't he just simply rule now while Aegon is laid up? It doesn't make sense for Alicent to be in charge right now. And that might work out to be good or bad for the Greens, but at this point, it just kind of is what it is. Anyway, next we see people trying to flee King's Landing, including Hugh and his family. But the gates are shut just before they can get out. And a gold cloak tells the people that they are to disperse by order of Aemon Targaryen, Prince Regent and Protector of the Realm. And then someone asks in the crowd if he means the king. Hugh replies, I don't know. Someone in the crowd then shouts, we want meat. And then all the people begin to yell the same as they continue to push towards the gate. So here, I think there are people in the crowd who take this to mean that Aegon may be dead, and it just hasn't been officially announced yet. And this is just a small moment to move Hugh's story along, as well as to just kind of reiterate the point that people can kind of sense that there's some unrest that's going to be happening in King's Landing for the foreseeable, and they're trying to kind of get out before things go to crap. I'm certain they will find a way out of King's Landing, probably as soon as next episode. So that is that on that, as the kids say. So next we find Jacaerys, now with the twins, talking to Lord Forrest and Sabitha Frey. Lord Forrest tells Jacaerys that Lord Grover Tully has not yet declared for Rhaenyra, and that it means death to bear steel against your liege lord. Now Jacaerys asks if it's death to bear steel against your queen, to which he gets no answer. He tells the phrase that the Lannister army is marshaling to the west and that they will need to check them before they reach River Run, that will require passage. Lord Forrest asks, what if the Stark army is too slow, telling Jacaerys that the winds are rising and that winter is nigh upon them. Now, Lady Sabitha tells Jacaerys that their hesitance does not lie in Rhaenyra as queen or in Lord Tully, but that they fear Vhagar, plain and simple. Now, Jacaerys remarks that they fear a dragon leagues away when his dragon sits just outside their walls. It's not the same, my dude. Not nearly the same. But you tried it, but okay. Now, they both look up at Vermax, and then Lady Sabitha asks if they would have Jacaerys' protection. And he promises both his protection and that of Daemon. And I just feel like that's a serious check with me type situation. I mean, young boy might be doing a little too much promising right now because, Daemon is a wild card and you don't know if Daemon's going to consent to this said protection. And Lady Sabitha asks if Daemon indeed has consented to their ask. Jacaerys states that he will do what his queen commands. You best hope so, my boy. Lady Sabitha admits that Jacaerys' promise lends them some comfort, but that she remarks that the dragons cannot be in two places at once, or three. Jacaerys asks the phrase what it is they want, and they tell him they want Harrenhal. I don't know why everybody wants this castle. I mean, I understand it's like the key to the Riverlands, right? But Harrenhal is essentially doesn't provide any protection because it's all broken up, and we see what it's doing to Daemon. Like, Harrenhal is basically the psych ward. Jacaerys tells the phrase that for that, his mother will require more than the crossing, but that she would require bent knees. That was kind of a gangster little line he said there. I like it. And look, I know Jacaerys thinks, he's making big boy moves right now. But there are too many cooks in the Black's kitchen. And Jacaerys has no idea what Rhaenyra's plans for Harrenhal might be, or even what Daemon's plans might be. Shit, I don't even know if Daemon knows what his plans are right now. And I just feel like this is going to be the reason more people on the side of the Blacks are going to get killed, because Rhaenyra can't control her people. Rhaenyra, control your people. Next, we find Daemon at Harrenhal splitting firewood, and he stops when he hears screams, and he looks up and sees Alicent standing on the balcony looking down at him. Daemon then carries the wood to a bucket and has it lifted up someplace. We then see him off in a corner of the castle talking with Alicent. She tells him that he was born to wield a sword, but not so much an axe. He tells her that there are others that would sit idle and wait for their claims to be brought to them, but that is not his way. Alicent asks if splitting firewood justifies what's followed him here. He replies, "Let it not be said that Daemon Targaryen failed to dirty his hands in this war." Alicent asks to see his hands before telling Daemon to sit. Now, she examines Daemon's bloody hand as she tells him that she hears strange things from Brackenland, from Stonehenge and Lamb's Wool and Moray. Daemon asks if there's news, and Alicent says no. She tells him that what she hears in the wind. So the screams Daemon just heard are directly related to whatever's going on in Brackenland. She says that she hears children being taken from their mothers, men coming home and finding their doors unlatched, their wives having been carried away. Daemon explains to Alicent that war is a terrible thing. Alicent explains that this is not war, but instead crimes against the innocent. Things that any upright man would repudiate. Now Daemon asks, surely you haven't taken me for an upright man. And Alicent chuckles sarcastically. But Daemon goes on to explain that the Brackens had their chance to do as he asked, and that they will perhaps think better of their decision if their children's lives are staked on it. Alice asks Damon if that's the kind of army he would raise as she ties a bandage around his bloody hand. Men that hate him, that serve under duress. And then Damon promises that once the Brackens agree to serve him, that he will treat them fairly and set an example for the rest of the Riverlands to follow. Alice remarks that, once again, it's the weak and the women that must endure before walking away. Damon then calls out to Alice, telling her that Aegon will not likely survive his ordeal and that the realm will suffer under the rule of Aemon One-Eye before getting up and walking past her. He tells Alice that she should pray she never meets him, which means she absolutely will meet him, and I think she does in the books as well, that he would cut her down as soon as wish her good day. Alice remarks that she heard the same about Damon. She then tells Damon that she will cross him no further, as she's sure his tactics are approved by the Queen, stopping Damon in his tracks. He turns back, telling Alice that Rhaenyra cannot succeed, even if he wills it to be so. So you see what he thinks about her being queen. He goes on to say that the people who support her will not be ruled by her, that they look to a man for strength. He asks who is better suited for it, the Hightowers with their scheming or Viserys' first true heir. He tells Alice that when he takes King's Landing, that Rhaenyra is welcome to join him there and take her place by his side, that they might rule together. Alice asks what will happen if he should lose. Damon replies, well, then I'll be dead and none of this will be my problem, before walking away. But before he disappears down the hall, Alice remarks that it's a pity he never knew his mother, causing Damon to turn back once more as Sir Simon appears with a message from Stonehenge. He tells Damon that the Blackwoods have overtaken the Brackens and that their banners have been pledged to him. As he walks away, he tells Sir Simon to call Sir Willem to Harrenhal that he might congratulate him. So I guess Damon now has his army made up of the Blackwoods and the Brackens at the very least. And I guess we'll have to see how that serves him going forward for the rest of the season. But next, we see Corlys standing on the docks at Driftmark, staring at what looks to be Dragonstone in the distance, but it's kind of dark. I couldn't really tell. And I've always wondered just how close these two castles really are. On a map, they're both in Blackwater Bay, but, it's kind of hard to tell exactly how close they are. Can Corlys see the barbecue, from the docks of Driftmark? Like, can he see the cookout taking place? I don't know. Anyway, Baela approaches him, telling him that she sought him back at the castle and that she was surprised to hear that he was down at the docks. Corlys tells Baela that his castle is a tomb, empty and haunted. Baela laments that she did not see the castle in its highest days. She goes on to tell Corlys that Rhaenyra wishes to name him Hand, and he smartly remarks that even the death of his wife does not content Rhaenyra, wondering if she has not asked enough of his house at this point. Baela tells Corlys that it is a sign of her great esteem. He asks if she thinks the position will compensate him for his loss. And Baela sharply tells Corlys that he should pledge his fleet to King's Landing then, that they would happily accept it. Corlys states that he would rather sail it to the west and be lost. Baela remarks that he has done so before, at great cost to himself and those who loved him. She goes on to explain that Rhaenys was not only his wife, not a thing to be taken from him, that she was a Targaryen princess, the queen who never was, that she flew to Rook's Rest of her own free will in defense of her kin. Corlys remarks that she died. Baela explains that she died the way she would have wished to die, with honor in Dragonfire, just as her mother, Laena, did, and the way she would wish to meet her end as well. She tells Corlys that she grieves her grandmother, but that she carries her on with her, that she will see Rhaenyra ascend the Iron Throne as Rhaenys wished, as Rhaenys herself should have, that he should do as he sees fit. She hands him the 10 and she walks away. But Corlys calls out to her, telling her that he would make her his heir. She tells him that she is blood and fire and that Driftmark must pass to someone who is salt and sea before finally walking away. And, here I thought the writers kind of let Corlys off the hook. They're making it so he absolutely has to pass Driftmark to Alan simply because there's no one else who would have it. And I would have rather seen him pass Driftmark to Alan because Alan was the proper choice. But, I guess. Now, inside the hall in Dragonstone, Rhaenyra stands in front of the painted table as Sir Broom enters. Rhaenyra tells him that he was correct in stating that their hope for an army lies with Damon, and that she has perhaps erred in waiting for him to prove himself. So she wants him to go to Harrenhal. Sir Broom asks if this is her removing him from her council, and she tells Sir Broom that while she will not deny that he has tried her patience as of late, or that she would prefer a council more inclined to champion their queen, but that he and his house has served her father well, and that she knows he would never accept a Hightower claim. And he tells her, not while I live. She goes on to note that they cannot challenge King's Landing directly without the Riverlands, and that she does not want to send a raven for Daemon to simply disregard. She tells him that she is asking him to reason with Daemon to find out his state of mind and whether he intends to raise an army for her or for himself. So see, at this point, Rhaenyra even understands, like, shit is fishy. Daemon taking too long, like, what to do? What's going on? Now, Sir Broom remarks that Daemon wouldn't dare. And then Rhaenyra asks Sir Broom if he's ever known Daemon to lack in daring. Like, Daemon be Daemoning. She tells him to go with haste and that she will send men to look after his safety. He then asks Rhaenyra if she has any message for Daemon. She tells him to tell Daemon that she would very much like to finish their last conversation. And Sir Broom then bows and he departs. So it looks like Rhaenyra has always known, like I stated, that Daemon might betray her while he was gone, which begs the question, why'd she marry him in the first place, knowing that he viewed her as the person who stole his inheritance? At one time, I thought she married Daemon for true love, because I honestly think that's why she wouldn't marry Jason Lannister back in season 1, and why she wouldn't choose a husband when Viserys sent her on that the American Idol tour, because Daemon was always the man that she wanted. Then I thought she married Daemon for his strength after she faked Sir Laenor's death and sent him away. But, now the move just looks foolish, and Viserys looks like a genius by comparison, go figure. So back at Harrenhal, Daemon lies awake in bed, and we hear rumbling and water dripping, along with some murmuring of some kind. Then we see that glow under Daemon's door that has typically meant, someone's approaching, probably Alice, and, that's when Daemon typically starts to go in his dream state. But we do hear the footstep approaching again, and Sir Simon finally appears this time, telling Daemon that the River Lords have come to seek an audience. He asks what hour it is, and Sir Simon tells him that it's the hour of the wolf. So Daemon gets up, gets dressed, and heads to the hall to indeed find the River Lords there to speak with him. He tells them that he must begin with a lesson in etiquette for failing that improper fear of their Targaryen master. He then asks the River Lords if there's some reason they feel free to wake a king in his bed. So Simon interjects, telling Daemon that House Bracken has been brought to heel by the Blackwoods. And Daemon tells Sir Simon that news is stale. He already knows that. So Simon explains that there have been complications. At that point, Lord Darry steps forward, claiming that the sacred septs on Bracken land were looted and burned. Lady Mallister then claims that the fields and farms were also burned, the livestock taken, and peasants put to the sword. Lord Piper then claims that the Blackwoods pursued the women and the children, that there were works of barbarity committed. And then Lord Mouton states that punishing the Brackens for treason is one thing, but that these acts, simply cannot be tolerated. Daemon tells the lords that the Brackens were given their chance and that they would not see reason. Lord Darry then claims that the Blackwoods have exploited the war for the crown to visit atrocities upon their old rivals, before Lord Mouton states that they proudly carried the banner of House Targaryen, which seems to surprise Daemon, especially since he told, Sir Willem that, hey, you got to do this because the crown can't do it. So why they would do what they were doing, carrying Targaryen banners, I guess that's the Blackwoods trying to protect their own behinds, because, you can always be like, hey, Daemon told me to, come in here and get clean. But he then hears a female voice say, a terrible war is being fought in these lands. And when he turns to see who said it, he finds a young Laena Velaryon at his side. She goes on to ask him if he has looked after their girls. Now, Lord Darry states that they should have expected nothing more from a man who ordered the slaughter of a child in his mother's arms. Daemon states that is a lie and that he will have the man who told it brought before him. Lord Darry responds, telling Daemon that his man is half the kingdom. In other words, everybody know you foul. You feel me? Lady Mallister then approaches Daemon, telling him that the Riverlands is an ancient place, watched closely by the eyes of the old gods and the new, and that dragon or no, they shall not raise their banners for a tyrant. And after everybody leaves, Damon just kind of stands there, shook, right? Now, I know a lot of people are saying that this might be a dream, but I disagree. I think this actually happened in person, in real life. I mean, I guess we'll find out as the episode moves forward. But yeah, I just given how everything has flowed this particular episode, I actually think that this actually legitimately happened, even though it was really late at night when the Lord showed up, the River Lord showed up. But from there, we see Rhaenyra in her chambers, deep in thought, and she's getting her hair combed by a servant girl. I don't know why we even needed this scene, because nothing was said. It lasted like 5 seconds, but I digress. Especially since this episode ran long. But anyway, next we go to King's Landing and we see Alinda Massey arriving, hooded and trying to enter the city in the pouring down rain. She runs into a gold cloak at the gate who tells her to move along. She tells him that she's on an errand for the Lady Massaria. The gold cloak claims to have thought Massaria was dead, and Alinda asks if she would die without collecting her due. She then tells him that she must see an old friend. The gold cloak tells Alinda that most people want out of the city these days before he looks around and escorts her off to the side. And, next we see Sir Broom and a company of soldiers galloping through the fog and the dark in the Riverlands, no doubt on their way to Harrenhal. Back in King's Landing, we see Alinda move through the wet streets, knocking on the door of a woman who calls her by name. And then from there, we see Corlys sitting in his throne room, holding the hand of the kingpin, deep in thought. So, I mean, in the books, he does become Rhaenyra's hand, so I'm assuming in the show he will as well. And next, we go to the throne room in King's Landing, and we find Aemon standing in front of the Iron Throne. Now, he doesn't sit on it. He's just kind of standing there looking at it. And Helena happens upon him, and she asks him if it was worth the price. Helena be knowing stuff before it happens, so she probably knew it was going to happen the whole time. But Helena don't never say nothing that make any sense to anybody so they can figure out what to do about this stuff. She just be, talking in riddles. But in Aegon's room, Alicent sits at his bedside as he lay there, his body still badly burnt, as he labors greatly to breathe. And then as Alicent gets up and walks out, we hear Aegon mutter, "Mommy." So he knows that she's there. He's kind of conscious, even though he's not awake. And what that kind of tells me is that I expect Aegon to wake up next episode. Now, back on Dragonstone, Jacaerys has returned from the twins to find his mother going through a book about Visenya, Vhagar's first rider and the first wielder of Dark Sister, if you know anything about your Westerosi history, right? And Jacaerys states that he hopes Rhaenyra does not plan to use her as an example. She asks why not, and he simply responds, that was a long time ago. And see, this is Rhaenyra again. She's reading about Visenya because I think she's the same way that Arya kind of looked up to the story she heard of Visenya. She's thinking, well, I can fight just like Visenya did. Again, I just think it's a really bad idea. She puts herself at great risk. And if you kind of know how this story kind of ends in the books, this is a bad idea for her to enter the fray. But, we'll leave that. We'll stick a pin in that for now. So Jacaerys turns to leave before his mother asks what the mood was at the twins. Jacaerys tells her that the Freys wish to be granted Harrenhal at War's End, assuming that they win. And Rhaenyra tells Jacaerys that she is proud of him, that he has done their cause a great service. He asks why then she appears angry. Rhaenyra explains that she knows he is upset at being prevented from action. She asks him to imagine her lot, that she is a dragon rider as well, with a war being fought over her ascension, and yet she must always be prudent, sending others to fight and be felled in her name. And Jacaerys reminds Rhaenyra that she is the tie that binds all of them, that no harm could come to her. She reminds Jacaerys that he is her son and that she did not give him leave to go to the twins in the first place. He tells Rhaenyra that she does not give him leave to go to anything, but that there is no one else, and that Baela cannot bear the burden alone. Rhaenyra asks what Jacaerys will do when Aemon comes hunting for him, asking if he will fly before Vhagar as Lucerys did. So, everybody's scared of Aemon. It's because he got the biggest dragon, I think, but it's also because he's a psycho. She goes on to tell him that Daemon is not there and that Aemon now rules in King's Landing. Jacaerys asks if Aegon is dead. Rhaenyra remarks that dead or alive, they have no answer for Vhagar, that Aemon will not wait long to press his advantage. She goes on to say that she has done all she can from Dragonstone, but if all else fails, that it is she who must fight. She tells him that Vhagar is big, but that Cyrax is quicker. Jacaerys reminds her that so was Meleys. Rhaenyra reminds Jacaerys that Meleys fought 2 dragons at Rook's Rest and that one of them is slain. That's the second person who has basically said that Sunfire is dead. She asks if she should, fight for her birthright or if she should wait there until they're all destroyed. She remarks that she needs dragons. Jacaerys reminds her that they have no dearth of dragons, reminding her that both Vermithor and Silverwing, very large dragons, sleep just beneath their feet. Rhaenyra claims that if only they had riders, that none could stand against her. Jacaerys mentions Rhaena, but Rhaenyra reminds Jacaerys that Rhaena nearly lost her life the last time she tried to claim a dragon. And, we didn't exactly see that, but, we're just being told. Jacaerys then reminds Rhaenyra that there are those in their line who never ruled, those who married into other noble houses, their children born with other names. Rhaenyra tells Jacaerys that their blood would be thin, that a dragon will only accept a dragon lord to ride it, or so say the histories. Jacaerys claims that those histories are Valyrian histories, meant to build them in glory. She asks Jacaerys if he is suggesting that they put a Mallister or a Tarly on a dragon. He tells her that it's better than death and defeat. Rhaenyra then thinks before stating that there must be records on Dragonstone of their line and those who fell out of it. Jacaerys marks that there could be scores of them. Rhaenyra then says, it's a mad thought, before the episode cuts to black. And this is the writers writing towards the whole Dragon Seed part of the story. I did wonder how big or small that part of the story would be, how many episodes that they would be participating in this conflict, for example, or seasons. I've mentioned some of them in the previous videos from this season. So far in the show, we've actually seen Adam of Hull, who I'm guessing will still ride Sea Smoke. Oath White rode Silverwing, and Hugh Hammer rode Vermithor. Now, I don't think we've seen Nettles yet this season, so I'm assuming we won't see her at all, or Sheepstealer. I think Sheepstealer was her dragon, right off the top of my head. I'm not sure. Anyway, these dragon seeds will no doubt have a lot to say about how the events to come in the war will play out. So I'm really, really excited and looking forward to that. Now, in conclusion, not a whole lot happened this episode, but this episode did set up some pretty big things to come. But in that vein, I'm starting to see a very bad omen myself wherein this show is concerned. And I think the writers are on the precipice of making a really bad mistake here. Because I thought for sure that House of the Dragon would have a better ending than Game of Thrones did, if for no other reason than the book the show is based on has already been written to completion. So there would be no confusion as to how the writers should go about getting to the end, right? I mean, they've basically given you a map, how to get from beginning the story to the end. But, as we've discussed, the book this series is based on, Fire and Blood, is an in-universe reference book, basically, where a fictional author attempts to reconcile different historical accounts of the conflict. Some have said that the book reads more like a work of pro-green propaganda. And until very recently, I figured the show was simply going to take the book and flesh it out, adding nuance and, and try to turn what some might view as a rather dry account into a compelling character-based television drama. And don't get me wrong, the writers here are doing that to a certain extent, but they're doing it in a way that so consistently sides with the blacks that I have to wonder if complexity is really the goal here, or if it's really an attempt to rescue Rhaenyra's reputation from the fictional fantasy historians who some have feared have tarred her name. I always tell people that in order to write well, you have to write small. And writing small is hard. If it wasn't, then everybody could do it, and everything that we watch would be absolutely positively great. The writers are having a difficult time writing small here. Because it's not the progression of the story that's the issue. It's the inner beats of the story that are presenting issues and problems. The dialogue. It's the writers trying to insert basically feminist propaganda at this point into the story where it just doesn't need to be. This whole idea that neither Alicent or Rhaenyra can rule because men just won't let women be in charge is kind of silly because, again, If that were true, Rhaenyra would have no one on her council. You know, because let's be clear, Rhaenyra had half the kingdom on her side until the blood and cheese incident happened. So this idea that men won't accept a female ruler, it's just not true. And Alicent complaining about, well, they won't let me rule because I'm a female. It's like, well, no, that's not why they won't let you rule. They won't let you rule because it's not your turn. You had your turn already. You're a dowager queen. You need to be somewhere putting your feet up and just chilling. And so this idea, though, that basically, you know, girls rule and boys drool is what the writers seem to be going for here. And it's like, you know, and even in these few episodes that we've already seen this season, it's the girls who are trying to avert war and all the men who are going, nope, I got to get clean. And I'm just like, it's starting to get a little bit ridiculous, if you ask me. Of course, I still think that the show is going to be good enough to do great things, just as Game of Thrones was. But I mean, they're messing this up, and they don't have to. I mean, this shouldn't be hard. I mean, you got the answers to the test. But you know, we'll just see how the last few episodes go, and I'll probably just make my greater assessment once season 2 comes to an end. But given that, you know, what do you guys think? Did you enjoy the new episode? What's your favorite storyline so far? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go and check out themadscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all on the next video.